Okay, good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see you here on this August sunny morning. And as Mika said, we are having, rather than having a sermon series over the summer, we are just going to have some talks. What's the difference between a talk and a sermon? I don't know, ask Sharon next week. I guess, it's not part of a sermon series. Theoretically, it should be a bit shorter. We'll see, again, whether that actually happens. But what I did pray to work out what to bring before you today on this Sunday as a talk. And I was thinking, well, it's the summer, and so I want something that's a bit summery. And for me, when I was very, very little, I think I got confused with palms and psalms. And so I always used to think that this was a psalm. And it was only when I was older that I tried to work out the difference between psalms and palms. But for me, always still, the book of Psalms is a nice summary book. So that's why I've chosen to have a look at the Psalms. Psalms is a massive book. There are 150 of them, if you know. I don't think we've sort of formally studied it in a sermon series, but we use Psalms really, really regularly. We often use them at the beginning of a service, at the end of a service. We used it in Holiday Club. They were the memory verses in Kids Holiday Club a couple of weeks ago. Of course, even today, we based our prayers around the Psalms as well. Often we forget what a preacher says in a sermon or a talk. But there was one that stood out for me like 20 years or more ago, and the heart of that particular sermon or talk was this: how important the Psalms are for us. And if you wake up, or if you come to the end of the day and you're not quite sure how you're feeling, and maybe your thoughts and your feelings are a bit muddled, and you're not quite sure, you want to pray to God, you want to express how you're feeling to God, but you're not entirely sure how to do that. This sermon from 20 years ago or so reminded us that we already have in our Bible a set of wonderful prayers that are the Psalms, and we can use these as basis for a prayer, very much like we did earlier on with Psalm 23, to use it as a prayer. So if it's hard to verbalize or process what you are feeling, what's on your heart, or even if you do know that, then my challenge to you today is, why don't you have a look at the Psalms afresh and see if there is a psalm that matches how you are feeling, that resonates with how you are feeling. So when your words fail, there are words already here written down for you. Have a flick through the Psalms. Find words that have already been written thousands of years ago. A lot of them by David, but there were other authors as well. And it's comforting, it's reassuring to know that the writers of the Psalms have already gone through those sorts of feelings and thoughts that you have at the moment. Okay, yes, in a different context, in a different time, but those sorts of feelings people have had for centuries and centuries. So have a flick through, find one of the Psalms, or just a part of one of the Psalms that resonates with how you feel, and let that be your prayer. If your words are few, then let that psalm be a prayer for you. Therefore, the Psalms can be good for your soul, and that was the title that I gave to the talk today, a psalm for your soul, to find a psalm that sort of matches with how you are feeling in your soul. Because I'm preaching, I can choose which psalm I want. And so I have chosen Psalm 139. It's a psalm I absolutely love. It's a psalm that resonates with me, that has resonated with me quite often in my past. And actually, I think it's beautifully written as well. It's almost, well, it is a piece of poetry, I suppose. It's really well written. So what we're going to do today, we're going to go through Psalm 139 together. So again, if you have a Bible, a physical one is at the back there, or a digital one, just have it in front of you. I think that'll be really helpful as we go through this Psalm 139. I want to try and explain why I think this psalm resonates with me, and maybe it resonates, or parts of it resonate with you and how you're feeling, maybe even today as well. So, there are 4 or 5 sections, so I'm going to go through it one by one. So let's have a look at this now. So the first part is this first section in verses 1 to 6, and also 17 to 18 at the end there as well. I've been married for 16 years now, and my wife Kendra, I think, knows me pretty well from having lived with me for 16 years and gone through all sorts of stuff, and really knows me. And despite that, she still loves me, which I find incredible, that somebody can know me that well and yet love me. But in these verses, we see how much more true that is of God. That God, even when he has searched me and knows me, still loves me, still looks after me. And this is a prayer for me to pray to God, saying, God, you know me. You've searched me. You know when I sit, when I get up. You know my thoughts, even though you may not be here. You know my thoughts. You know when I go out. You know what time I go to sleep. You are familiar with all of my ways, even more so than Kendra with me. Before I say anything, Lord, you know what I'm about to say. So, Lord, thank you that you know me so well. You are all-knowing. Your knowledge is not just about me, but you know, God, you know all of everybody who's here, and you know everybody in the world. You have such great knowledge. And that's why the psalm writer in verse 6 says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. It's so amazing. I love this verse 5. You hem me in behind and before. And it's sort of like this little picture of this little, I don't know, chick or duckling or something being hemmed in, being fully protected. And sometimes that reassurance is what I need. I need to know that, in the midst of whatever's going on, Lord, you're hemming me in. You are looking after me. You are keeping me under scrutiny. You're really looking at me. And that's very reassuring for me. It's also very accountable, actually, because it shows that the Lord is looking at me, really knows what's going on with me. And I can't keep anything a secret from him. So that is also a challenge to me as well. Jesus, in Matthew 10, he was sending his disciples out, and he said this, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid, you are worth more than many sparrows." And that, again, was a passage when I was very, very young. I remember there's probably a couple of songs about that as well. Just how all-knowing God is. So that's my first point. You see, I am going to get through them quite quickly today, hopefully. How wonderful God is, how all-knowing God is about me. Okay, the second one then, we'll have a look at verses 7 to 12. If you know me, you might know that I like traveling. I like going to different places, exploring different places. Sometimes I get that opportunity through work as well, which is even more fantastic, to be paid to go to travel to different places, all sorts of different places. And I've lived abroad in my past, so had the privilege of that experience as well. But I've also been in some slightly precarious situations in other countries, and I find this part of the psalm really reassuring for me, particularly when I travel. I don't have to travel to be grateful for these verses, but particularly when I travel, because it speaks about God being everywhere. So I don't have to be in church to have God's Spirit with me. I can be literally anywhere in the world. And it says, well, where can I go from your Spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? That's a rhetorical question saying, I can't go anywhere without you. Lord, you are always there. If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I'm down in the depths, you're there. So there's the extremities of even up there or down there, God, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, so it dawns in the east, that's right, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so in the east, God's there. And if I settle on the far side of the sea, and in this context, the sea was the Mediterranean Sea. So if you have a rough geographical knowledge of Israel, where David lived at this time, the Mediterranean Sea still is in the west. Okay, so the point is that, from the east to the west, from one extremity to the other, God is always there. I recently had the privilege to go well across that sea for work purposes and to travel. And I was on my own at the very end of that time. All my colleagues had left and gone home. And I had a couple of days to myself. And I had to make one connecting flight and then change at an airport and then fly back to London. And this was a few weeks ago, and I was sort of thinking about what I would say to you today, and I was thinking about Psalm 139. And I was thinking, all the traveling I've done in this particular work trip, God, you've been there, you've provided, everything's sort of worked well. I just need to get this connecting flight. There's not much time where I change airports in order to get my flight home to London. I really want to fly back to England. And I got to the airport and it said, flight delayed. I was like, no, it has to be on time. And God said, so you're going to preach on Psalm 139, are you? I was like, okay, yes, right. Absolutely. I trust in you, Lord. Wherever I go, you're going to be looking after me. So whether this plane is delayed and I miss my connecting flight, or if I manage to get the flight, it's okay. You're with me. And I had to try. And I think God was having a little bit of a laugh with me because he was like, come on, if you're going to talk about this, you've got to believe it. So, I was like, okay, I'm going to believe it. I'm going to believe that whatever happens is good, but I would definitely like to be able to get the connecting flight. Fortunately, it was delayed, but it wasn't delayed massively. And so I did a massive run through the connecting airport, and I did just about get my flight, and I got back to England all okay, which was great. But it reminded me that wherever I go in the world, God is with me. Jesus came to fulfill these verses, I think. Jesus went down into the depths. Jesus went down into that darkness that it talks about in verses 11 and 12. And he managed to defeat those depths, that darkness. And he was then raised to life. And we are all raised to life now with him. And we have that future in the heavens. So when it says, even the darkness will not be dark to you, the night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you, that's only because of Jesus, what Jesus has done for us. And that's another reminder to us as well, how important Jesus is in fulfilling this, in us being able to have a relationship with God, to know that wherever we are in the world, that he will be there too. Okay, let's go on. verses 13 to 16. Now this is another favourite passage of mine, definitely. You created my inmost being. In Hebrew, the language that this passage was written in, inmost being means kidneys. So the kidneys are obviously sort of well inside you. But it's metaphorical. It's saying, God, you created everything about me, both physically and in my soul, in my spirit. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I absolutely love that idea of God is sitting there with his knitting needle saying, today I'm going to make Graham. Knit one, purl one. So he knits us together. Verse 14, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. However you were born, whatever you look like, whatever you are like, that's how God created you. My sister was born prematurely. We didn't know whether she would survive, whether my mum would survive. Both did. And afterwards, my mum put up a poster with that verse, Psalm 139:14, up in the nursery when my sister was tiny. So this is a really powerful, important verse for me. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. It's a verse that I had when Kendra was pregnant, when my children were born, not knowing what they would end up like. It's also a verse I come to, if I'm having a bit of an ugly day, if I'm just feeling a bit like that, then I know, come on, it's all right. God made me. God made me in a way that he wanted me to be. Verse 14 again, your works are wonderful. So I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. So that's great that the psalmist has got to a point of saying, however I've been made, that's good. That's an excellent work. So for today, if you're feeling a bit rubbish about how you are, how you're feeling, what you look like or anything, know that God created you, and that was an excellent work that he did. Jesus, we know from Isaiah 53, he was probably not a physically attractive man, but that wasn't the point of why he was on the earth. He was on earth as a human for a particular reason, a particular purpose, which for him was to go to the cross and to die for our sins. God created him for that purpose. And God creates us specifically the way we are, the way we look like, for his purpose. We need to find out what that is, but please don't do what I do sometimes and go to God and say, oh, why have you made me in this particular way? Why am I this? Why am I that? How can you serve God the way that you are? Because God created you in an excellent way. Okay, fourthly, verses 19 to 22. Now here the psalmist gets a bit angry. Okay, it's been all lovey-dovey so far, and now it's like, but God, if you would just slay the wicked, if you would get rid of those bloodthirsty people, get rid of these evil people. And it is, of course, a reminder that we live in a fallen world, and it's okay to get annoyed with the fact that many people do not live as God wants them to live. So much so that the psalmist just would like God to strike them down with a thunderbolt or something. He's so fed up with these people who are not living in a godly way. And I think that is something that we can identify with as well, still in this world. There are loads of people, which we're not going to name, obviously, but we're just, if they didn't exist, then the world would be a happier place. But ultimately, it's God's decision as to what to do with them. The psalmist would have God, just cut them down completely there and then. But we know that God lets these people live for a time so that his purposes are carried out. And God's response to this is Jesus. That, yes, there is a judgment coming on people who are evil, who don't do what God wants them to do. But there's a way out for them as there is a way out for us. And that response is Jesus. And following the logic through, I do exactly the same thing as this psalmist does. So the psalmist starts in 19, all these evil people, they're awful, And then, by the time he gets to verses 23 and 24, he goes, okay, but I'm not perfect either. And that's the same with me. I get annoyed at how ungodly certain people are living and then come to a point of realization and think, I'm not great, I'm not perfect either. So the psalm finishes with verses 23 and 24. Search me, God, and know my heart. And you can see that goes back to verse 1 at the beginning of this psalm, when the psalmist says, well, you have searched me, Lord. And he ends the psalm with, well, search me again. Know me properly. Know my heart. Know what's in my soul. So this really is a psalm for the soul. Know my anxious thoughts. I think I've preached about this before, that, I do continue to have anxious thoughts in my life. I think anxiety and worry is we all have it, at least from time to time. And so this, again, is a call for us to go to God with our anxious thoughts and say, Lord, you know what? I am anxious about this. Anxiety is not the way that God would have us live. So it's right to go to him when you're anxious. It's right to go to him when you are feeling as if there's something offensive in you. That's the sin. You feel not quite right. So go to him when you've sinned or when you feel not right. And lead me in the way everlasting. Lead me in that way that you, God, have for me to live because of what Jesus has done to restore that relationship with you. Help me live in that godly way. That's my prayer as a result of that. So that's 139, Psalm 139, from me to you, just to see if any of that resonates with you. And if it doesn't, that's okay. There are 149 other psalms for you to look at this afternoon whilst you're, lounging in the sun. See if you can find one of them or part of one of them that resonates with how you're feeling and use that as a prayer. And like I said, I really want to encourage you that's a useful tool, a useful thing for you to do. If you're not quite sure how to pray, if you're not quite sure how you're feeling, have a look at the Psalms. See if you can find one that clicks with you. So we're going to finish by praying now. I'm going to pray through 139 with us. I hope you would join me in that prayer as well.